everybody. We're here with week 4. Um, it's kind of a big week content-wise, so I'm going to try and make this as painless as possible, but we have a lot to cover today. And so I'm just going to start running you through some of the things that are expected this coming week, as well as a review of some of the content we've had. You guys should all have gotten your emotional intelligence papers back, and they were superb. They were great. I think a lot of you did a lot of internal seeking to see how you felt with the content, with yourself, where you fit in those domains, which is exactly what we were looking to get from it. Um, you probably all had a little bit of feedback around making sure that you are honest or that you're making kind of a sensible plan for yourself. And so that's kind of the purpose of that paper, is so that you guys can walk away with, these are the places where I can strengthen my EI. Because the nice part about emotional intelligence is it is something that you can proactively work on in a way that you might not be able to do with IQ. Because IQ isn't about trivia necessarily or memorization. It's about like the innate ability to learn. But EI is really something that you can work on in a very specific way. So, sorry, that's my dog. Pull the cord on my computer. Beautiful. So anyway, you guys did a great job. You have specific feedback on your documents from me. So make sure you have track changes on and can see the notes. But moving forward this week, congratulations, you do not have a paper this week, which is great. I'm going to go through some of the things that are going to be expected. There's videos and readings for this week that are really, they're important, not just for this class and the purpose of doing your projects and your papers, but they're important career-wise because it really establishes a good foundation for the toolkit you can have as a clinician. How to work with people, how to foster change, how to um, get yourself through the EI work that you want to do for yourself. So that's really what this week is about. It's about putting in the concrete skills that will propel you forward. So that's a lot to put in 1 week. There's no writing as far as the paper, but there is a lot of reading. And so let's go through that real quick. Okay, here we have week 4. You have these readings right here. There's 4 readings. They all offer different perspectives and different tools. So I would say they're all probably of equal importance. If you're looking into being into supervisory roles, the leadership reading is really essential. It talks about the different styles. We all have like styles that feel more natural for us. However, all of these styles are beneficial in certain situations. So it's good to know the skills that work in maybe a crisis situation compared to a leadership style that works in a situation where people have poor morale. And so it walks you through what's going to be the most beneficial in that regard. These two, the Siegel and Poulin, they have very specific readings, and I'll get a little bit more into them in the content. But this TOEL reading I refer to for the rest of the semester. It's important, and we're going to go through why it's important. However, I always like to preface the reading with, it feels floofy when you read it. So it feels a little bit like hippy dippy, kind of. It's hard to get through. It's hard to get through in that it's very like philosophical, and maybe it's a little bit too new age or alternative, and that's fine. But I'm going to challenge you. You guys are probably tired of me saying, but I'm still going to challenge you to read it and get the most from it that you can. And I'll explain to you a little bit what I mean when we talk about this week's content, but it is a really important read to really be able to look at yourself honestly and clinically, and yes, great stuff. There's also a series of 6, they're very short videos. about attachment styles. So they talk about the different styles that people bring to the table. When you're working with clients, it's really great to think about, what was this person's origin story? How might that have impacted this person's attachment style? And this really kind of helps explain what those are. There's also going to be a point where you're talking to your diet partner about your previous groups and families and friends, and this can be part of that conversation. Where do you think you fit in on the attachment style and why? And so it's important to understand yourself as a good example, because you know yourself in and out, so you can really speak to that experience. But you're going to need to use that frame of reference when you're working with clients as you learn what their upbringing was like, and how they were able to manage through it, and why they might have a specific attachment style. Moving on. Go back to week 4. All right, so that is your readings. There's also a video training by Dr. Barol about talking papers. It's a great example to read or watch, rather, and especially because it's going to be part of what we're asking you to do this week. So it's important to watch this. Talking papers is a really good exercise. It's good for almost all kinds of groups. So I would definitely recommend watching this, paying attention, seeing how it's done. Dr. Barol is our associate dean at this point, so she's one of the leading experts on it. So talking papers is a really good way to bridge gaps when there's conflict. And so we're going to ask you, as part of this is a good segue actually, we're going to ask you as part of your discussion to do the talking papers exercise with a group that you work with. It could be your family group, it could be a group at work, it could be a group of friends, and really what you're doing is using the talking papers exercise to get everybody's voices heard on a specific topic. If you're feeling really adventurous, you can use a real topic. I've had people make their decisions on vacations based on this exercise. I've had people facilitate policy change in this exercise. But you can also talk about different perspectives on politics, or different perspectives on what to have for dinner. It's really just a way to get everybody's opinion heard when people don't agree. So just find any situation in which people don't agree and walk through the talking papers exercise. It makes you feel more comfortable with using that skill, and it is a good way to have that conversation in a organized, nonviolent kind of way. You're also going to speak to attunement, brain-to-brain connection, and attachment in here. And so we're going to go into this because those concepts are things that are detailed in the readings, but I want to make sure it's clear what we're looking for in this, because there has been some confusion in the past. So with the attunement, the brain-to-brain communication, and their implications for attachments, we're looking for us to really speak to how your brain communicates with itself, how you were able to identify in yourself the emotions going on in your head, and your thoughts and your feelings, and then also how to attune yourself to the person you are with. Have you ever been with somebody who and I know a lot of you have heard me say this in your papers, there's always, the virtue is always the middle between two extremes. So the extreme of this is still not a great methodology, but you probably know people who are super attuned with other people's emotions to the degree where they can't separate themselves. If somebody else is crying and sad, they are crying and sad. If somebody else is angry, they immediately escalate and become angry. So that is a super hyper attuned individual, but they probably have a hard time negotiating with themselves what's going on in their heads. Do they realize that they're mirroring? Do they realize that they're taking on somebody else's emotions? And so that whole inter-dialogue and external dialogue plays out in how the attachments play out in our role as social workers, in our role as leaders, and as colleagues and family members. And so your post prompt is just going to speak to how those specific ideas, working from each other's emotions, working with your own emotions, and the attachment, how relationships work for you, play a role in your social work lives. It's a little confusing. If you want a better explanation, let me know. I can always try and type it up. I don't have control over what's written here. And I have had students be confused about it in the past, so certainly don't feel sheepish. Okay, so that's your discussion prompt. I'm going to go back to week 4. And we are already all the way through your discussion boards, your dyad conversation. You're just going to have a conversation with your dyad partner about your past groups and small group discussion board and meeting. You're really going to want to start thinking about your presentations. Next week, I'll tell you really much more specifically about what the presentation is going to entail. Since this covers so extensively a lot of the different methodologies you can use, it makes sense to start thinking about if we were to do a conflict, what would be the conflict we do and what strategies might be helpful. And then we'll talk about how to play it out and what we expect as far as the actual formal presentation next week. But for now, it might be good to just start brainstorming. Certainly don't have to make any hard and fast decisions, but just to kind of gather your thoughts on what can be possible. And then finally, it's really important that you consider this mid-semester evaluation here. That is something that I get to look at. The input you give can dictate how we treat the rest of the class. If you would like more involvement from me, direct conversation, live, what's the word I'm saying? Live streaming of classes, so that you can ask questions in real time. These are all things that you can offer as possible suggestions, but you can do whatever you feel like is going to be helpful. A lot of times folks put in things I never think of, so please put that in there. All right, so that's your mid-semester evaluation, and that's the full week 4 thing. I do want to cover a little bit of nonviolent communication, and then I have a PowerPoint for us to go through the content for this week, because this week's content is it's just really varied, and it covers a whole gambit of things. I'm pretty sure almost all the topics we have for today could be courses in and of themselves. So I want you guys to all leave here, well-educated clinicians with a hefty tool set of options as far as how to work with other folks. So I'm going to be a little bit more organized this week than usual. So for nonviolent communication, I know you guys did a lot of work around that last week. You watched Rosenberg's video, which is great. I think typically the biggest hurdle a lot of folks have is identifying their feelings in a nonviolent way. And that was something that came up in some of the discussion posts around this. So what I did is I found this guide here, and you can really Google nonviolent communication or NVC and like feeling words or anything like that, and it would help. But what they do is they kind of group together words that are just about your feelings. Typically, when you're doing nonviolent communication, people find that they often end up inputting words that are loaded and more actions than feelings. So if someone says, I feel ignored, or I feel judged, or I feel, my dog, or I feel abused, so like these are actions. So somebody abuses you, somebody ignores you, somebody judges you. So those are really verbs that we're using, and they're also verbs that we're assuming the other person is doing. Now in abusive situations, like that's probably a terrible example, but with judging, like if you've ever been in a situation where you feel like you've been judged, there's a chance, and we have to just entertain this chance, even if you don't believe it. There's a chance we're projecting that feeling of judgment. So that person might not be judging us. We might be afraid that they're judging us, so we're kind of looking for it. Or we might be embarrassed about what we're doing, and so we're kind of projecting that feeling of shame onto another person, saying that they feel judgment towards us about it. And by doing that, we are able to escape some of our own feelings by putting it into another person, and then we can react dismissively. Like, that person doesn't know me. Because it's much easier to confront or ignore feelings that somebody else has than your own feelings. And once you identify your own feelings, you don't feel comfortable about what you just did. It's highly problematic. So before I get into a whole therapy thing about it, that's That's what I mean by feeling words that aren't really feeling words, right? If it's a verb that somebody else does to you, if it's something that you can't feel alone, then it's probably not a feeling word. But here is a list of a slew of words that are just about you, right? So you can feel compassionate, you can feel friendly. Sorry, my partner might be home. Um, so these are all words that you can use to express happiness and good things. I think typically therapists will charge you with trying to say positive things at first because nonviolent communication is really a tool that's helpful for people that are either A, very confrontational when they're advocating for themselves, or B, have a very hard time advocating for themselves. So since those two things are highly emotive, they're just high stakes situations, it makes sense to kind of go for the low hanging fruit and being, sometimes you might say, hey, I feel extremely empowered by the way you're managing me, or hey, I am literally delighted about all of the fantastic emotional intelligence papers. So by doing that, you are able to practice the skill in a really non-threatening, low-key way that doesn't seem like so intense. So uh, that often happens that you try it out on the positive feelings. But when we're talking about feelings like of judgment or feelings of being ignored, typically those feelings are down here and can be better described in a feeling that's only about you. So if you're feeling judged, you're not really feeling judged, you're feeling afraid of being judged, right? So you have a fear of being judged, and so maybe you're feeling anxious that that's happening. You're feeling um, alienated is a good word for when you're feeling ignored. Disconnected. Um, Typically, what it is that you feel like your need for attention or intimacy isn't being met. And so, typically, if that's the case, you're feeling detached, you're feeling removed. Um, so, it's just a good time to kind of go through all of these, and if you're having a hard time using the tool in live practice, which is challenging to reframe your work because you have to undo, a method of communication you've used your whole life. So that's a lot. And it is certainly something that a lot of folks try out in writing first. So you try out just like kind of writing down what the nonviolent communication three-piece uh, conversation would be like, and then also moving through it and executing it in lifetime. But after you start executing it in lifetime regularly, it becomes kind of a new frame of reference. It's like driving home from work, you might go a different way, and every time after you learn this new way, you have to really think about it so that you don't go back into like that muscle memory way of driving home until one day you stop thinking and you just end up at home. So you've made it. You've had that muscle memory reflex. You were able to say, I don't even have to really process it. This is now my main way home, and this is now my main way of communication. All right. So this is nonviolent communication. Um, if you have conversations with folks and you don't really know how this plays into it, feel free to pitch examples. We can always go through it at any other time in the semester. But as far as this week, this is the little slideshow I made. Bum. All right. I wonder if I can move this guy. Sweet. That's exciting. It's the little things in life. All right. So I call this one informing your practice because really the whole purpose is so that you feel like you have methods and strategies in settings with your clients. Um, so what I want you to think of is how you would define yourself initially. And so I did this for me. These are things that I would identify with. Definitely all of these things. So yeah, I would consider myself all of these things, right? Like I would consider myself anxious. I would consider myself easygoing and passionate, uh, intellectual. So this is just a mix of positive and negative things. I want you to take some minutes. I'm gonna give you a minute and think about how you would define yourself. I want you to write at least 4 things. Just do that real quick. I am gonna put my frozen pizza in the oven for dinner, and also put this dog somewhere. You do. What? So this is my dog. All right, so I hope you were able to get a couple of thoughts down about yourself. Um, she's not happy that I got her sister up here. So these are all things I definitely would identify with. Um, but what we're going to do is challenge that. And so let's think about if if that's really even true. So like, yeah, I do consider myself an intellectual. I do consider myself um, soft spoken. I do consider myself to be uh, morbid. I'm really morbid. I have a very dark sense of humor. But where did that come from, right? So I have a dark sense of humor because my parents died, and that's how I dealt with it. And so, like, if you were to ask me 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I guess 3 years ago, um, if I was morbid, I would say no, I'm a bubbly person. And then, things happen and you change. And since they can be changed, which is the next question, are they really something that is you? Like, that's not an element of me, it's an end result of life experiences. So all of those things can be changed. Another example would be being soft spoken. Yeah, I'm soft spoken for sure, but I'm not sure that you, as my students that I'm working with this semester, would identify me as such because I typically only talk to you through those videos, and so you've only really seen me speak. Um, and at work, I'm pretty loud. I'm pretty. Uh, I put myself out there. I tend to speak my mind. I put myself in a situation where I have the ability to contribute to the greater scheme of things at Widener, and so I'm not soft spoken there. So am I really soft spoken, or am I just super awkward in certain situations? I'm probably super awkward in certain situations, but I'm not awkward in all situations. So I'm not an awkward person. I am awkward in certain scenarios. And so the point is, and the toll reading will go into this, and this is what I mean by the toll reading being kind of like a lot. Like it's really um, new age type of stuff. So see, it's my puppy. She's not happy. I'm gonna let her down. Wanna get down? Yeah. Um, so um, basically, you just need to confront with yourself is I consider myself to be all of these adjectives, but I am not really those adjectives because at any given moment they can change. At any given moment they can become something else. And anybody who's worked with anybody with traumatic brain injuries knows that your personality is not innate. You can actually have an injury that doesn't impact you cognitively besides your personality traits. And so somebody who is usually very, very cold and abrasive becomes um, somebody who's full of humor and very warm. And so those things are fluid. And so we have to question how much of that is real. The reason why they want to break that down is you want to break down any barriers that becomes a defense. So you want to break down all the parts of yourself that become something that you would fight for. Like if somebody said I wasn't an intellectual, would I fight them on that? Probably, probably because I'm proud of that, right? So like um if somebody was like, no, you're incompetent, I'd probably be offended. And then we would not be able to have a dialogue. But in truth, I am none of those things. I'm not incompetent, but I'm not an intellectual. I simply am at that moment. So that's really the thesis of that entire reading is that you just are. And the sooner you strip away all of these ways we identify ourselves, these arbitrary ways of saying like I am something other than me, I'm something other than what you're seeing right now, those are things that we end up having conflict around and reasons why we end up having categories and divisions. Um, if I'm grouped with other folks who identify as homosexual, does that make me anti-heterosexual or does that make heterosexual folks anti-me? And so it creates all these barriers when in truth, like if you just think about me right now, I am just simply a person talking to you through this video. That is all I am. And so it is really heady. And I understand that. And the reason is you just, all of the labels we put on ourselves, no matter what they are, become words that we end up hurting each other with. And so the sooner you strip them away, the stronger clinician you will be. The sooner you are able to become less attached to all of those labels, the less significant it will be when somebody confronts them. Does that make sense? It's a lot. And I think reading Toll for the first time was really challenging for me. And so it's something that it took me a long time to buy into. And I would not be surprised if you have a similar issue. So take what you can from it. Take as much as you can from it, because it really is a way to protect yourself. You know. All right. Okay. So, ooh, I have to move this guy. I guess. I'm gonna be right here. Boom. All right. Um, so that's the point is that you're removing yourself, right? So every interaction isn't about you. If somebody confronts you and says you didn't do X, Y, or Z, that doesn't mean you're incompetent. And I don't trust them. Okay, so by having this newfound sense of detachment, you're able to go through pragmatically and really think about how each interaction is working for your client. You're taking the self out of all of your interactions. You're able to really be much more in the moment and give that person what they need based on their ego defenses, based on their sense of needs. So um, it's just a good preface to get yourself in the mindset of working clinically. Okay, so these are the readings. Oh, if I tap my screen, it goes. Okay, so anyway, I'll move this up. Okay, so I went the other way. Here we go. So here's a toolkit. I listed all of the tools on here so that if you wanted to screenshot this, feel free. Just in case you're screenshotting it right now. And so all of them talk about these specific ways in which you can work with people. I have all the styles of leadership listed, but in the Poolin reading, you really talk about the specific strategies that you can utilize. And I starred the ones that I tend to find really helpful Although I really should have started open-ended questions. So if you're working with somebody who's a person of very short words or doesn't really have the motivation to be there, asking extremely open-ended questions can be really helpful. Um, Exploring silences is a skill set I think every clinician should be able to master. And by that, I mean being able to sit for a period of seconds without putting in your thoughts. Some people take up to 27 seconds to process what you have said and come up with a response. And if anybody here has any social anxieties, you know sometimes you end up having to rehearse or script a response before you're able to really feel comfortable saying it. So if you have somebody who's not giving you the answer you need or not giving you enough detail, I implore you to try sitting for 27 seconds. It's excruciating, excruciating amount of silence. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get because it's putting the onus on the other person. Like nobody likes to sit in that silence, but you know why you're doing it, right? So you have a strategy here. You're here with a plan, which makes it a lot easier, especially over time, because everything that makes you uncomfortable with exposure becomes easier. And so if you're having a hard time with silences, if you're the type of person to typically chime in and to fill in the gaps, please try not doing it. If you're having somebody, if you're working with somebody, even in your small group, and they're not participating, dead silence them because nothing will pull people out of their shell like knowing you're expecting something and just sitting in that. So try it. Exploring silences is great. Reframing is something a lot of us have already had experience with. You know, if somebody comes in really negatively, trying to pick apart the pieces that are negative and trying to look at it and try and find out how it can be positive. So if I end up having to go to pick up my kids. I don't have kids. Pick up my siblings' kids, which has happened from daycare. How do I make that a positive thing? Well, honestly, that's probably a positive thing. This is a terrible example because I kind of really love when I have to pick up them up. They're hilarious. Having to go grocery shopping. So you have to go grocery shopping. You hate going grocery shopping. It's Monday after work, which is like the notoriously worst day to go grocery shopping. But you have to for whatever reason. Like, how are you going to reframe that to be positive? Is it going to be like, oh, but I get to have really fresh vegetables for dinner too because I'm doing that? Or, oh, do I get to have access to everything that I want? Or since I'm the one doing grocery shopping, I get to choose whatever snacks we have or get soda or something. So, reframing a situation so that you can look at how it's going to bring positivity to you. Um, so yeah, so all of these are really good things. They're really well detailed in the Poolin reading. I wanted to put them all in one place, so if you wanted to kind of pull the details away, you could. And so I can post this into our files if you would like, so that you can have an access to it. I just want folks to feel comfortable with all of these different methods. So this week, we've already kind of reviewed this already. Really feeling throwing this little video around everywhere. It's like my favorite thing now. So there are, again, no formal papers. Realize you couldn't see it up here. You have 2 videos. You have a heavy dose of reading. You're going to meet with your dyad partners and your small group, and you're also going to do your midterm evaluations and 2 business board posts. You're going to need 1 response for both of these posts. So that, I believe, is the end of the slideshow. Yeah. So that's basically it for this week. I'm going to publish this tonight. Hopefully you feel comfortable going through it. And then if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Think of ways we can improve the course. I'm always happy to do that. And then I will be looking at your process notes shortly. So excited. Hopefully everything's going well with your small group. If you guys want to invite me into your small group meetings, that's something I've done a lot in the past. Feel free. I'm more than happy to come in and just you can have kind of like a small group session where you can ask questions about the presentation, or if you're having conflict, you can invite me under the guise of asking for help with the presentation. That probably happens more than anything else. Please know that conflict is a good thing. If you've gotten into conflict already, think of how quickly that group is developing. You just have to Get it all the way to emptying. Yay. If you have any questions, you know where I'm at. You guys are doing great. I know this is your first semester and that's scary, but you're doing amazing. So, and you're halfway through. Well done. All right, I will see you guys next week.